In recent years, China has made huge strides in transforming itself from the world's factory into one of its foremost technological powers, and this has become increasingly the case when it comes to military tech. Jensen Huang, chairman of the world's first $5 trillion valued company, the US-based tech company Nvidia, recently claimed that China was now only nanoseconds behind the US in chip manufacturing. Showcases like the expansive military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of China's victory over Japan at the end of World War II certainly look very impressive, to borrow President Donald Trump's assessment of it. However, lingering doubts remain about just how well some of China's most high-tech military gear actually performs, particularly its high-profile J-20 stealth jet. According to reports, the warplane has some major flaws that make it far less of a worthy competitor to the NATO jets it was built to counter. So, is the J-20 less than what it's made out to be? Let's take a look at why the cornerstone of China's Air Force might actually just be a flying paper tiger. The Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon, to use its full name, is China's first and arguably most advanced stealth fighter. China does have its follow-up, the Shenyang J-35, also known as JXY, waiting in the wings, and it will likely be more advanced than the J-20 once it reaches serial production. China also has 3 distinct 6th-generation stealth fighter prototypes going through the ropes: the Shenyang J-50, Chengdu J-36, and an unnamed tailless aircraft observed at Chengdu. However, for now, the J-20 is the only stealth jet deployed in any significant numbers in the Chinese Air Force. Some 300 J-20s are believed to be in active service, the largest fleet of stealth fighters of all non-Western nations. The J-20 was designed primarily for air superiority and specifically to counter the US's stealth jets, the F-35 Lightning II, and particularly the F-22 Raptor. However, as we'll see, there are 5 major flaws in the J-20 that make it unlikely to be a worthy adversary in practice. Certainly, on paper at least, it's right up there among the most impressive high-end jet fighters in the world, with specs in the same ballpark as the Raptor. They're both of similar vintage, with the manufacture of the Raptor beginning in 1996 and the J-20 in 2009. The US decided to halt production of the Raptor in 2011, primarily due to the high per-unit cost of up to $150 million. That became unsustainable when the US's military focus shifted from countering near-peer adversaries to fighting insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan, where air superiority fighters were correctly deemed less necessary. When the contract was terminated, 186 of the original order had been delivered, with the remaining funding shifted towards the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. At an estimated $100 million each, the J-20 is also far from cheap, but given ongoing production and upgrades of the J-20, China obviously feels that the ends still justify the means, at least for now. The F-22 beats the J-20 hands down for pace, with a maximum cruising speed of approximately 1,500 miles per hour, as compared to the J-20's 1,535 miles per hour, a 47% improvement. The F-22 also has a faster rate of climb at approximately 62,000 feet per minute versus 60,000 feet per minute for the J-20. It also has a slightly higher maximum takeoff weight of 83,775 pounds as opposed to the J-20's 81,600 pounds. However, in other areas, it's the J-20 that holds the edge. The J-20 has a slightly higher service ceiling of 66,000 feet compared to the Raptor's 65,000 feet. It also has a much larger fuel tank capacity, able to carry 4,166 gallons as compared to the Raptor's 2,400 gallons. The difference in payload capacity is less dramatic than it might seem. The J-20 can reportedly carry around 26,000 pounds of ordnance, while the F-22's total load, including both internal and external stores, comes in at roughly 23,000 pounds. The Raptor trades some of that payload for stealth and maneuverability, prioritizing performance over raw carrying power. The J-20 is also longer, 75.46 feet compared to the F-22's 62 feet, and has a wider wingspan, 49.2 feet versus 44.5 feet. However, as we'll see shortly, when it comes to stealth jets, this size differential doesn't provide the J-20 with any advantage. On the contrary, the J-20 size is one of the 5 major flaws we're discussing. It's worth pointing out that some of the flaws may have already been resolved in the very latest versions of the J-20, rolling off Chinese production lines. But we're going to work with the info we currently have. As you'll know, if you're a regular viewer of the military show, the concept of inertia doesn't exist when it comes to the world of military technology. New technology and systems beget new countermeasures, which beget new systems, and on it goes in a relentless game of one-upmanship. The point is that, like the F-22, the J-20 has undergone various upgrades over the years and continues to receive them as warfare and the technology that enables it evolves. Although production of the F-22 was canned a decade and a half ago, the existing fleet has received numerous upgrades since, part of a $7.8 billion investment plan through 2030, aimed at ensuring the F-22 remains the world's premier air superiority fighter into the 2040s. These include integration of the Infrared Defensive System, or IRDS, to replace legacy missile detectors and improve threat detection, dynamic synthetic aperture radar, SAR upgrades for more precise high-resolution ground mapping, and new helmet-mounted displays like the Thales Scorpion and the next-generation fixed-wing helmet, to name but a few. Likewise, the J-20 has also received numerous upgrades over time, not least of which is an effort to address its first major flaw, the dubious performance of its engines to date. The F-22, for its part, is powered by two Pratt & Whitney F119s, each of which produces around 35,000 pounds of thrust at full afterburner. These engines give the Raptor its world-renowned speed, including its ability to supercruise. That means it can fly at supersonic speeds for sustained periods without the use of afterburners and with a full load of internal weapons. It's an area where the F-22 has literally had the J-20 eating its dust. Developing modern high-performance jet engines had long been the Achilles heel of Chinese aerospace output, and it only started making serious headway in developing jet engines domestically relatively recently. As a result, the original J-20s were powered by Russian AL-31FM2 engines. Now, the AL-31F family of jet engines is far from the worst ever built, with the original variants entering service in the early 1980s. The two-shaft axial flow afterburning turbofan engine was originally built for the Soviet Sukhoi Su-27 fighter aircraft, with a view to maximizing fuel efficiency at extended ranges and loads. Subsequent upgrades have shown it to be reliable and efficient, capable of operating under extreme conditions, including severe air inlet distortion and fluctuation, and maintaining stable operations at speeds of up to Mach 2, even during inverted and flat spins. Variants of the engines are still used in all of Russia's Su-27 family of fighters, and in several variants of the Su-30 and Su-33. That includes hundreds of AL-31FP engines for India's fleet of Su-30 MKIs, made by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, an Indian state-owned aerospace and defense company. Another variant, the AL-31FM, powers China's Chengdu J-10 fighter jet, with Series 3 and Series 5 upgrades of the engine powering the upgraded J-10B jet. None of these is the best fighter aircraft in the world, but they're not the worst either. Their engines can pack a punch. When China conceived the J-20, its first stealth jet, the intention was to power it with a domestically produced engine. However, when development ran into various snags and delays, they opted for a further modified version of the trusty AL-31F, dubbed AL-31FM2, as a stopgap. But while the J-20 is supposed to be a stealth jet, its engine decidedly is not. The AL-31FM2 also lacked the thrust and efficiency needed for sustained supersonic flight without afterburners, as evidenced by the large gap in maximum speeds between it and the Raptor discussed earlier. By 2019, China had started replacing the Russian engine with a domestically produced WS-10. To be precise, this was the WS-10C. Its predecessor, WS-10B, had been installed in the initial low-rate production runs of the J-20, but the quick transition to the Russian engine tells you how well that worked out. In fact, the WS-10C could be considered another variant of the AL-31 in its own right. The WS-10 was reportedly developed using the AL-31F documentation, with early examples directly using the AL-31F control system. Now, in terms of performance in the J-20, the new engine offered some improvements, but still fell short of the performance benchmark set by Western fifth-generation fighters. It's been criticized for its limited thrust-to-weight ratio and questionable reliability. The WS-10C is also seen as a stopgap engine by China. However, with a brand new engine, the WS-15 is earmarked to replace it. This new engine is intended to solve these problems and finally enable true supercruise capability, theoretically putting it on a far more even keel with the F-22 in a dogfight. However, the WS-15 has faced years of development delays, technical setbacks, and endurance issues during testing. Following a process that started in the 1990s, the first images of J-20As powered by the WS-15 only started surfacing in 2023, and the engine is now only entering serial production. So it stands to reason that only a small portion of China's J-20 fleet is currently equipped with a WS-15. For the rest of the fleet, there's at least a 3,000-pound gap in thrust between a WS-10C and an AL-31F powered J-20 and an F-22 per engine, which should make the Raptor far more agile in a dogfight. These engine limitations also directly impact the aircraft's combat readiness, sortie rate, and ability to perform in high-intensity conflict scenarios. As previously noted, the J-20's earlier engines were not optimized for stealth. The newer WS-10C engines have improved this somewhat, featuring serrated afterburner nozzles and digital controls designed to reduce radar and infrared signatures. However, engine design isn't the only factor limiting the J-20's overall stealth profile. There's another significant weakness in its airframe that continues to undermine the aircraft's effectiveness and makes it, in some respects, a paper tiger. While it's essential to manage, including infrared, visible light, radio frequency, RF, and acoustic signatures, the primary goal of stealth technology in aircraft is to minimize the aircraft's radar cross-section, or RCS, making it appear much smaller or preferably invisible on radar screens. According to the US Air Force, the F-22 boasts a radar cross-section the size of a marble when operating at maximum stealth, making the aircraft nearly invisible to even the most advanced military radars. By contrast, while the J-20 is marketed as a stealth fighter, its RCS is significantly larger, particularly when viewed from the side or rear. Like the Raptor, the J-20 has a nose radar dome, an electroconductive cockpit canopy designed to reduce the plane's signature. Supersonic inlets obscure the engines from radar, and features like internal weapon bays and radar-absorbent coatings also diminish visibility. Nonetheless, the aircraft's stealth capabilities have been called into question on more than one occasion. In May 2018, for example, Indian Air Chief Marshal Birender Singh Dhanoa claimed that Indian Su-30 MKI fighters could detect a J-20 multiple kilometers away. That's not surprising, given the known stealth design flaws. In particular, the engine nozzles on earlier J-20 variants are exposed and lack the serrated edges or shielding, a primary culprit in expanding radar visibility found on Western stealth aircraft. Also, as mentioned earlier, the greater dimensions of the J-20 are a disadvantage in terms of the plane's stealth, because the larger a plane is, the easier it is to detect. Compounding these design issues is China's frequent public showcasing of the J-20, including flyovers and airshow appearances. China recently conducted its first static public display of the J-20 in Chongqing, Jilin Province, at an event linked to the aforementioned Grand Military Parade, having previously only revealed it by means of flyovers and recorded footage. Such displays allow adversaries to gather valuable data on the aircraft's radar signature and characteristics, undermining its ability to operate undetected in contested environments. The bottom line is that the J-20's diminished stealth capabilities severely limit its survivability in high-threat zones. The third major issue with the J-20 revolves around its avionics and sensor fusion. To be sure, the aircraft, especially later editions, is equipped with an advanced active electronically scanned array, or ISA, radar and electro-optical targeting systems. Chinese state media and affiliated outlets, such as CCTV and Eurasian Times, have even claimed that thanks to a breakthrough in silicon carbide, or SiC, semiconductor technology, the J-20 can now detect F-35s and F-22s up to 435 miles away. They claim the J-20's radar now far exceeds the capabilities of the ISA systems found on the F-22 and F-35. The AN/APG-77 and AN/APG-81 found on the F-22 and F-35 are both extremely advanced ISA radars. However, their effective detection ranges against low observable aircraft are typically estimated to between 30 and 60 miles. That's in all likelihood the kind of range the J-20's new radar can handle too. Detecting stealth aircraft at 435 miles is virtually impossible due to the realities of radar physics, atmospheric attenuation, and the exceptional RCS of the F-22 and F-35. Also, as we noted, while radar is the most important component of stealth and threat detection, there are a variety of other sensors that need to be monitored and merged. This kind of sensor fusion is a critical component of fifth-generation warfare, enabling pilots to receive a unified real-time picture of the battle space. In the F-22, pilots benefit from a proven top-tier sensor fusion system, powered by two common integrated processors, or CIPs, each roughly the size of a breadbox. Together, they deliver the computational power of two Cray supercomputers, seamlessly integrating data from a network of sensors, including the AN/AAR-56 infrared and ultraviolet missile launch detector, and the forthcoming infrared defensive system, or IRDS. In the J-20, this integration appears to be less seamless. Effective sensor fusion requires long experience, a robust software development ecosystem, hardened supply chains, and plentiful flight hours across complex scenarios, all areas where China is accelerating but has not yet demonstrated parity with US programs that have benefited from decades of iterative combat testing and coalition data sharing. Less effective sensor fusion means reduced situational awareness and slower reaction times. Furthermore, the aircraft's electronic warfare systems are believed to be less sophisticated than the F-22's, making it more vulnerable to jamming and spoofing. The centralized command structure of the Chinese Air Force may also limit pilot autonomy. Put all together, and you have a supposedly stealth aircraft with vastly reduced effectiveness in dynamic combat situations, where split-second decisions may make the difference between life and death by a massive fireball in the sky. The next major flaw in the J-20 would probably be the most crucial in a dogfight: limitations in its maneuverability and close-range combat. To some extent, it's an unfair point to make, and perhaps misleading to compare the J-20 to the F-22 in the first place, since the aircraft were developed with different roles in mind. The F-22 was designed as an air superiority fighter, geared for air-to-air combat, but has grown to incorporate ground attack, electronic warfare, and signals intelligence roles. By contrast, the J-20 is designed primarily for long-range interception and air superiority missions, with an emphasis on engaging targets at distance using advanced missiles like the PL-15. Nonetheless, its larger size, canard configuration, and lack of thrust vectoring in most variants make it less agile than the F-22, which excels in high-G maneuvers and dogfighting. The J-20's design prioritizes range and payload over agility. As we've seen, in those two departments, it does indeed have a significant advantage over the F-22, which enhances its ability to fulfill the standoff role effectively. However, in a visual range engagement where quick turns and evasive maneuvers are essential, it's toast. Not only is it slower and clunkier than the F-22, but it lacks an internal gun system, further reducing its effectiveness in close combat. That means the J-20 is heavily reliant on its long-range sensors and weapons to avoid dogfights altogether. That's all fine and well in its designated standoff role, but it does make the plane much less versatile than the F-22 or F-35. The final flaw doesn't just apply to the J-20. With rare exception, it can pretty much be applied to all Chinese military hardware, and indeed the Chinese army itself. We're talking about actual combat experience. You may have noticed that none of the claims made about the aircraft's avionics, engine metrics, or stealth capabilities, etc. can be verified. That's because the J-20 has never engaged in actual real combat. By contrast, the F-35 has seen action in Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, Syria, and has been heavily involved in the relentless flattening of Gaza. The F-22 has also not seen much combat in military conflicts, leading it to being described as the world's best boxer with no one to fight. However, it has been involved in multiple training exercises spanning years, unlike the J-20, whose performance remains largely theoretical, based on simulations and scripted training scenarios. This lack of empirical data makes it practically impossible to assess how the aircraft performs under the stress and unpredictability of combat. That's not likely to change anytime soon either, since the J-20 has not been exported to any foreign air forces and hasn't participated in multinational exercises that would allow for benchmarking against peer platforms. You might think that gives China an advantage, keeping its Western adversaries in the dark about the plane's actual capabilities. But the isolation is actually a major drawback because it limits the feedback loop necessary for iterative improvements and reduces opportunities to test its interoperability and adaptability with other segments of China's military. Sum all these flaws up, and to paraphrase the words of former US Air Force General Kenneth Wilsbach, head of Pacific Air Forces, even the J-20 with the new WS-15 engine is not anything to lose a lot of sleep over. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so you don't miss out on the latest analysis of military tech here on The Military Show. Thanks for watching.